Hey everybody, it's Karen Hutton, and we're live. And so I'm just going to take a minute before we get really going to pin a text here in the chat. See if I can walk, talk, and chew gum. And then I'm going to pin it. So, hi! Welcome aboard while everybody's getting in here. I got a little flippy thing going on with my hair. I'll just leave that there for you to enjoy. Super informal today. I'm planning, I'm working, I'm doing all kinds of things, and one of them is I'm talking to you guys. Hello. I want to know, first of all, when you come in, tell me where you're from. Where are you in here from? I love hearing all that, seeing where everybody's calling in from, who's up late, who's up early. I know one person that's in here is in Costa Rica, and that's on my bucket list of places to visit. So while you're getting in here and telling me where you're from, I'm going to let you know that today, let's see, Long Island, here's Long Island. Hi, Long Island. Is it hot there? It is boiling here. Northumberland, England. Okay, so I just kind of want to have this big live map right here, and then just pin where everybody calls in from, and then I'll plan a world tour and visit all your places, because that's how I feel about traveling. I want to go everywhere and see everything. And y'all can hear me good, yeah? That's good English, by the way. You can all hear me well? Yes. Hot, but just over a storm. Oh, that's good. So at least you're moist. After a storm, sometimes it cools down, sometimes it doesn't. Hemet. You know what? I never know how to say that town in California. Wait, in CA. So is that Canada or is that California? You know, these are the things I got to know. It helps me kind of get into into it. Stonehouse in the west of Scotland, another place I want to visit. It has just turned 8 p.m. and it started to rain. Send some of that here. We're in the desert. It's going to be over 105 here today, I think, which is something like 42 in Celsius, I think. Hurricane passed by you. I'm really glad to hear it passed you by in Florida. I always think Florida will be fun, and then I'm deathly afraid of hurricanes. I don't know how you do it. I admire you. Short E, California. Hemet, California. Hello, Hemet. Houston, Dubai. Hello, Dubai. Okay, never mind. Wordplay, it's stupid. I do stupid wordplay. Sun's out, nice clouds. Yes. Sun's out, no clouds. Ouch, if you know what I'm saying. All right, so I was just catching up on where everybody's phoning in from. Flooded in New York City? Seriously, I didn't realize that. In the subways. Ouch. But that smells good. Why do I always think of that? Why do I go straight to the smells? I don't get that. Anyway, I'm going to get on to it, because I don't want to keep you here all day. But I want to get on with my share. But I also wanted to let you know that I'm starting something new. This is all very informal, kind of the way I'm doing it. But this is going to be part of a weekly series that I'm going to do. A couple other announcements that go with that. But I'm going to do a weekly series for my photographer friends where I'm looking over here because I've got my notes, because I have so many things I'm really excited about, and I'm afraid I'm going to forget them. So pardon the notes. It's all just happening in real time. So I wanted to do a weekly series for a couple of different purposes. First of which, of course, is my photographer friends, where I share some inspiration. Maybe it's editing, maybe it's about shooting, maybe it's about a way of thinking or a philosophy. Because I was doing a podcast called The Woo for a long time, and I just haven't had time to do it all. There's just so much going on. So I thought this would be a way to, bring it all together and do it in a visual way. And so I'm going to do that weekly. I'm going to try for a day. I'm going to try a couple of different days, but I'll settle on one. But do it weekly so that we can all get together and get to know each other. We used to do Google Plus years and years ago, and that was one of the things that made it so special, was the way that we connected there. So I want to do that here and have you all be part of my life and my world, and vice versa, and get to know you, you get to know me. It just feels right. I've been missing that. I've been very kind of hibernating, and this is part of us connecting in a real way. I think this is what I would like to do. So today is about editing. Now, photo editing. And I'm tying it together actually with a really cool upcoming event, which is kind of my special announcement for today, which is that I'm teaching 2 classes on editing, which normally I don't do. I talk about inspiration a lot and I show pictures, but I don't always go into editing. But I'm doing it in Photoshop World, which is normally an in-person conference, like a 3-4 day conference, which I've taught in the last few years. This time it's virtual, and I pinned my link in the chat. So if you want to know where to go check it out, use that. If you don't mind using that link, that would be great, because that's my code that I get credit, for people who decide to do it. It's a 3-day conference all about, photo. It's largely Photoshop and Lightroom, but they do expand out beyond it into photography and into third-party plugins too, but it's largely about editing and creating your vision, photographically speaking. So my 2 classes are, I'm going to get the wording right, how to create, easy for me to say, right? How to create art with Procreate, because Procreate is an app for the iPad, which I use in a lot of my work. And so people have been asking me to show, I've shown a little bit here actually. If you go look at my IGTV, I did 1 or 2 episodes where I kind of showed a little bit about it, but I'm going to make it more official and actually teach it in Photoshop World, the basics of Procreate and how I use it on my photographs specifically, because I do some other things with it too. But with my photographs, I've just sort of found some really fun ways to take your creative vision even further if you like to do that sort of thing. And then the second class I'm teaching is my editing process from start to end. So I think I'm doing 3 images. One's, pretty simple, basic landscape image, and then one of my horse images that I do more with, and then one of my more fanciful, creations, some of which was done in Procreate. So it kind of ties them together. See how I did that? And that's going to be another class that I go into, but there's so much wonderful education in Photoshop World that I hope you'll check it out. And again, that link is pinned to the top of the chat. So today I'm going to show you a piece that I'm not doing in Photoshop World. Because what I want to focus on today is what I do at the end, like what I do after Procreate. And I'm not so much covering that in Photoshop World, but I wanted to give you a little flavor because the way I do when I do use Procreate, the way I go is do my thing in Procreate, then I bring it into Photoshop, whether that's just to finish it for coloring or texture or whatever, or if I decide to go further and really make it fanciful. So I've got one of those, and then I've got a new one I'm working on that I haven't quite settled on what I'm doing, so I just thought I'd show you the process. It's a little rough around the ears right now. So we're going to do that, and then let's see, what else do I want to make sure. So all that being said, if you enjoy this sort of thing and you want to be notified, because like I say, I'm working out the schedule. I also want to get feedback, which you can certainly do here, but my newsletter, my email list is kind of where I have the more personal conversations and, special notifications, and you get to know in advance, and I always let them know first about anything, whether they're specials or events or what have you. And so you can sign up for that at KarenHuttonArt.com. KarenHuttonArt.com. You can also get 20% off your first purchase there, but you can ignore that if you don't want that. Just sign up for the newsletter. That's fine. And I'll be announcing these as I go. So here's another announcement before we get going, and then I'm going to jump into the Photoshop thing. I'm about to go on a road trip. Oh yes, I am. I need to sip because I just got so excited I choked myself. Nothing like being live and choking on your own spit. You know what I'm saying? It's earthy. So I'm about to go on a road trip, and I haven't been able to do that since 2019. I'm very excited. So I'm in the planning stages. It was going to go one direction, and then we had a problem with that. So now I'm just at the last minute scrambling and putting it together for another direction. So I'm going to bring these lives to you weekly. But while I'm on the road trip, I'm not 100% sure when and where I'll have reception. So I might record videos and post them. It's possible I'll do it that way, or I'll just do lives as I do have reception. We'll kind of see what the airwaves have in store for us up there. It's a little bit of seat of the pants. But I want to do that to share the adventure, to bring you along. I used to do this when I traveled around the world more, 5-6 years ago. I used to love doing postcards from wherever I was and posting videos. But now we have live, and it works a lot better. And I want to do it that way if I can. But bring you along and kind of share what I'm thinking and the challenges and the adventure and why. So the purpose of the trip, of course, is photography, but it's also just to go deeper in my creativity, in my thinking, in what I want to bring to this whole scene in the future. I'm also fulfilling my Fujifilm project with the GFX 100S and my assigned lens, which is the 120 macro. But I'll be shooting with lots of different lenses and cameras and stuff too. But that's a project that I'm working on and fulfilling, and it's so far it's been really interesting, and I'm excited. So hi everybody who's coming on in. So now, with all of that having been said, and I think it's everything, I'll remind you of a few things at the end, but without further ado, because God knows, those of you who know me know that I can do like nobody else. I'm gonna first of all get over here, pardon me, I'm gonna get Photoshop on the screen. And here we go. I'm going to flip you around. And there we go. And there's my screen. All right. So this image. So this is what those of you who saw the little story this morning know, that this is the image we're going to focus on. And I got to organize myself here. So I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit. Can you do that on this? I know you can do it on... Oh, look at that. Oh, that's fancy. Okay, that's good, because then I can show you things. So I had somebody talk about, they posted, I don't know, it was on one of my socials, said, I'm really fascinated with Procreate, but I don't want to do cartoon things. So you can see up here, I've got a piece of my art on the wall that I drew. I actually did that in Procreate, but I did it from scratch. So I actually painted that in Procreate and then took it into Photoshop and finished it. So in other words, that one was not from anything to do with a photograph. This started with a photograph. So, and is it cartoony? Do you want to do this? I don't know. But the point is to know that you have some creative options, because those of you who have this creative muse that's a bit like mine, who is really always wanting, what's next? This is a really cool tool. So, all right. And I want you to know why. So it helps to know the vision behind an image and what drove it. So with this is literally where I used to live. Okay, so I used to live, my back in this picture is to the house. So I'm looking away from my house, and I miss it to this day. I used to live in Truckee, California. I'm a mountain girl at heart, and I just loved it, loved it in Truckee. But a whole host of reasons, they all make sense. I don't regret it. You know how you can miss something and it can be bittersweet, but you don't regret leaving? I don't regret leaving. I live now in Nevada, but not far. I still am part of the region. I'm just in a different area of the region, and I visit here all the time. But this was actually one of the glorious days at our home in Truckee. And I loved the boardwalk. I loved walking around the pond. We called this the pond. This water here, it was the little lake behind where we lived, and we had big skies. So I took a picture because I was like, I just want a really good photograph, not a fine art photograph. It was like a documentary style photograph, like a good photograph that captures this spot this way, that means something to me, so that every time I look at it in the future, I get that feeling in my heart, of, oh my God, I love it here so much. So it wasn't anything I was going to produce into a fine art photograph, yet I loved it. right? You know how you have things like that. So years later, so this was some years ago, years later, I had learned Procreate, right? So I was like, what can I do? I was like shown, yes, Cameron, I know that's you, so I'm going to call you Cameron. Cameron says, this will be a cool way to transform one of your landscape shots into a painterly painting. And yes, that is my whole point. I have friends who want to learn how to paint, but despair of ever getting good enough to do a really viable landscape painting. Well, this is not cheating. There's nothing cheaty about this. This is using your own art and your own creation and evolving it, changing it, shifting it into something new, and taking the vision and the feeling about why you took a photo and fulfilling it in a completely different way that makes your heart happy. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So that's sort of the feeling behind this image right here. So I learned Procreate. And in the Kelby 1 class, I'm only going to use the blur tool, because literally with a photograph, when you work directly on your photograph, the blur tool does everything if you know how to use it right. And what's more, you'll learn how to paint, because it teaches you the light and the shadows and how to create contours just by working with your own photographs, where all that is baked in. It's kind of magical. So I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to show Procreate today, because we'd be here all day. And this took an eternity to do, even though it's not even going to look that cool yet. So, but what I wanted to give you today was sort of the overview of like, okay, so this is what I did in Procreate, but this is what I did in Photoshop, because for me, they go together, right? So step two, I just started with the sky because I'm like, I wasn't sure. I looked at all this down here and I was like, oh crap, what do I do? Because you know how we are, photographers, we're so realistic, right? You think, oh, I'm going to paint and I have to paint every single little stitch over here. I'm waving my pointer over here. Let me see if I can find a bigger pointer. What's a good pointer tool here? Maybe I'll try this. Yeah, maybe you can see this a little bit better. But anyway, do I have to be realistic? Do I blur it? Like, I'd been traveling all over the world looking at art in like hotels and museums and places where there was sort of impression. I wanted this to be impressionistic because I wanted it to contain the impression, the feeling that I had of this place. So that style was going to work for me on this. And I had seen so much of that kind of work in my travels. I was like, let me see if I can incorporate both. That was my goal. So anyway, so I couldn't decide. I couldn't decide what to do with the bottom, but I was like, all right, I want to mess with this guy. And I didn't. And this is a point. The reason I wanted to show you this today is this is one of my first ones that I ever did. So my skills were not good. They really weren't. I was trying to figure out my brushes. Now I've got all kinds of preferences and opinions. But at the time I was like, well, what do I do? So I grabbed a brush that did that. And what brush is that? I don't know. But it was the blur tool. And I started blurring away. You can tell it's a blur tool because it kind of dragged part of the, let me zoom in just a little bit more. Hopefully that's good. Yeah, so it kind of dragged a little bit of the tree, kind of made a mess over here. And I was like, wow, that's different. Okay, let's move on. And then I went, so basically I didn't know what to do until I saw this, until I saw the way it dragged the blur sort of dragged the tree over there. And then I went, oh, I see, I could do that. Now this right here is the result of, this is all Procreate, and it just came over as a layer because I worked all in one layer. Now I work in more layers so that I can show them separately. They're all kind of smushed together here because that's some of the lessons you learn when you're new. But essentially I took the tool and created an impressionistic landscape. And I decided, trying to solve the problem of, well, what do I do with all this over here? Oh, you know what? I lied. Holy cow. I'm 180 degrees the other way. I said earlier that this pond, here's the pond, that this was with my back facing the house because we have had a boardwalk like this outside. But it's the other way. This is my house. This is where I lived, right on this pond. And there was a boardwalk that extended out this way that looks just like this one. But this is looking back towards the house. So, not that it matters to you because you're not there. I just thought it just surprised me. I just thought I'd share that. Anyway, so I was like, do I make it about my house or do I make it about the overall scene? And that's what I decided to do. So, There you go. So this is still using the blur tool, but you use these different brushes to create these different, like whether you want it to be like a charcoal or an oil painting or an acrylic or like a pastel or whatever. And the funny thing is, as photographers, you want to do every detail because we're used to every detail. But when you're painting and if you're doing something impressionistic, you don't have those confines. You don't have to stay within those bounds. In fact, it's kind of nice to have the freedom to create something as an impression. And then I was like, I think I want some leaves. I don't know. I can't remember now. Did I keep the leaves? I don't know, because I'm thinking, well, my impression is nature and leaves. It's even though it's not fall. And I threw in some birds. Let me move it over here. You can see the birds. And I threw in some, because I love paint splotches. I don't know what it is with me and different kinds of paint splotches on like a watercolor type of painting. It just makes me crazy. So in a good way, crazy in a good way. So I did that. Then let's see, what did I do here? Oh, I see. I also like messy. I'm kind of an analog girl at heart. So I don't know if you can see this. So I'm going to do a little zoom. And then I'm going to toggle this layer on and off so you can maybe see it. It's always hard with this broadcast quality, but I know it looks, you can see that it looks darker and then lighter, but really what I was doing was painting in some like lint and dirt and artifacts, because I think that's interesting. It makes it feel, and at the time, again, remember, I wasn't doing it because I knew exactly what I was doing. I was not knowing exactly what I was doing. But this is all still in Procreate, where I used a brush that did this. I'll tell you when I brought it into Photoshop. So then I was like, okay, well, I got a few dark leaves. What if I add some light, some lighter color leaves that are the same color as the sky? Because then it's like things flying around in the air and it feels all real and visceral, and I kind of like that. So that's what I did there. And then I was like, okay, so then I'm like looking at the pond going, all right, this is the pond. And the pond has, oh my goodness, we called it the pond. It was called the Glenshire Lake, was its name on the map, but we called it the pond. And it's so special in so many ways. I thought, I don't want it to just look like a blotch on the painting. I actually want it to have a little bit of reflective quality. And then my next thing I said was, how do you do reflective quality? Because I had no idea. But I think I ended up actually using a brush, kind of a pale brush on not full opacity, and just kind of did what I imagined was a little bit of reflection. And as photographers, we go, that doesn't look real. But if you stand back and look at the whole thing, stand back and look at the whole thing. Granted, it's in progress at this point. Who's to say? It just needs to have some kind of quality that could be a lake, because it's impressionistic, right? Nobody, you're the only one, you're the artist. And that right there, you're the artist, you have free reign, has given me more freedom in photography, right? So the way that this Procreate thing and creating this kind of art worked on my brain was to free me up in my photography and to break through some, certain kinds of bounds that we all get clogged up in. So that's another reason to learn how to do things like this. So, in case you're curious, all I'm doing over here on the right side there is I'm just toggling through my layers. So if I need to show you that, I will, but mostly I just wanted you to see how it builds through layers into this image in Photoshop. So now at this point, I brought it into Photoshop. So the first thing I did was, because I knew I wanted this to be fanciful, I didn't, honestly, my real thinking was I don't really think I'm good enough yet to create a landscape painting that looks perfect, like a master of landscape. So I thought, and I had this craving, it was a craving to create some pieces with a message. I wanted to see what that felt like, because I'd seen some that I liked in a certain style, and I was like, I'm trying to think of the words to describe why I wanted to do it. It just felt good. I wanted a message. I wanted this place, which was so special to me, my home, even though I blurred it all out. I wanted it to have a special message and a special feeling that went beyond, merely painting technique or lack thereof, or photography. I wanted it to be a piece that contained like the imprint of the feeling. And even if nobody else knew exactly what all the details were, they would get the feeling, they would get the message. So that was what was on my mind as I started to play. And so one of the things I played with was, so one of the things that I do in Photoshop is I purchase legitimately and use legitimately lots and lots of, graphic design elements, I guess you could say. So some of them I make, but some of them I purchase because I like to support other artists, frankly. And some of them make a living creating them and selling them. So why wouldn't I want to support that and create my work? So it's almost like the village gets even bigger. So I like to support other artists along the way. And so this woman, Anna, how do I say her last name? I'm never sure, Aspinus something. If people are interested, I can always post in the comments at the end of this. I can always post some people and links. But anyway, this is one of her design elements. And so I added it as a, let me see something here for just a second. What did I do right here? I don't know. Anyway, so I added this element and I changed the color and the hue and the saturation a little bit. So it's on, I'm trying to read it. I'm not showing this to you because I don't know what to show you yet. And it's not showing up the way I want it to. So suffice it to say, bottom line is I wanted I wanted to bang the camera because that's always fun. Just kind of like give you a little motion sickness. Anyway, I wanted a feeling in it that was sweeping. Also, I was a dancer and a figure skater, and I just happened to love these gestures that I'm using my hands, right, that sweep. So I tend to like creating, whether it's photography or art, pieces with that in it. So there it is. So then I added, from the same artist, she makes these really cool elements out of images of dictionaries, written things, whatever. This particular one says, and it's only, again, it's impression, so it's just a few little words. I'm zooming way in. And it's remember. The word that caught me was remind and remember, because this is my memory piece of my home in Truckee. So I wanted to remember, and I wanted to remember how it felt. I wanted to remember joy. I wanted to remember beauty. I want anybody who ever purchases this to remember those things too. Remember whatever it is that's important to you. Remember. So that was why I chose that text, and I put it in there with, word transfer. It's on a blending mode. Those of you who know Photoshop, I put it in screen. Now, screen just simply creates it so that it doesn't look like this, which is just a little too front and center. I didn't want it to be the focus of the whole thing. So in a normal blending mode, it's pretty bright, but in screen, it fades it out. It lets some of the image behind it come through, and then it's more like a memory, and that goes along with the word remember. So that's what I did there. Then that, wake up, rock the world, repeat. So all this I'm doing is layers in Photoshop, right? Bringing them in. They're all PNGs in this case. Cool text. Where do you find things like that? Adobe Stock. So no, well, you can. I don't know if you can. I buy most of mine Creative Market. So creativemarket.com is one really good place. And then Design Cuts is another one. Design Cuts, DESIGNCUTS. They're I think it's a couple of guys that run that website, and they do webinars all the time, all kinds of creative knowledge. But a lot of mine I get on Creative Market, which is where I got this. And then some of the artists have their own websites too. Some of them have everything on Creative Market. Some of them only have some of their stuff, but you can always track them down. And then if you find it on Adobe Stock, that's great. But I'm trying to think. Etsy, I find some of them on Etsy as well. You're welcome. But I always remember, and I always tell people, if you're going to do stuff like this, especially if you're going to sell it, Make sure you do it legitimately. Pay the artist, buy the right licensing, the right license, for the use that you plan, because that's what you would want if it was you. Believe me, trust me on that. So then I just doubled it. I wanted it to be a little bit stronger, so I just simply layered it again, and it gets a little bit bolder. All right, so then I'm standing back and I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. I like it. But now I felt like I wanted more texture down here. And I wanted it to be a, what am I trying to say? An impressionistic. So I have I have textures. This one's called Grandpa's Jacket. So here, I'm going to zoom this in so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, you can see it best probably right in here where the overlap is between the grass and the boardwalk. So there it is. Oops, sorry, hit the wrong line. That's always useful. Okay, so that's without and that's with. So that was a texture, which actually if I open that up, it looks like that. So that's what the texture literally is. So when you bring that into something like this on normal blend mode, it's going to look black on top. So I made this, I'll just show you, even though, all right, let me turn this so you can see what I'm doing. I'm over here in the blending mode, right? Just to show you, I'm going to go down the list. You can see that it's marked on linear light. So let me just show you, with the texture, what happens through the different blending modes. And you don't really see too much. Why is that? Oh, you gotta love it. You just gotta love it. That's because I've got the opacity also at 8%. So opacity 100%, and that's why I wrote the opacity down. But that's at linear light. So let me just go through the different blending modes, and you don't see too well. It either disappears or appears altogether, right? Or it might do something crazy like this, right? So you're like, okay, it's the right idea, but it's way too much. So at that day, I just kept bringing it down. I'm actually going to type this in. 8 there. 8% felt right to me. And then I can transform this thing. I can stretch it across or whatever, make it bigger, but I only wanted the crosshatches to be a certain size. So what I did was I doubled. Okay, so it ends right about here. You can see that line right there. So I brought it in and, had to kind of blend it a little bit, but I just duplicated that layer and then put it in this part so that, backing up, it was across the whole thing minus, so it was only up to into the trees, and I did not put it up into these trees. It goes up into these and kind of cuts down, but otherwise is across the whole thing. And then one of the features at our home in Truckee were the Canada geese. So I wanted some Canada geese. I would have put pelicans in, but I actually did a pelican all by itself, because that was another one of our family members in this part of the world. But the geese were really important, and the same artist that created the swoop and this text and the little newspaper also does these geese. Does a whole bunch of things. I mean, because that's like literally, she's a graphic artist. It's literally her whole business is creating this kind of stuff, and she loves doing it, and she's brilliant at it. So I pay it and pay for the license, and I use it, and that's the purpose for which it's intended, to extend your vision in your way. So there's a lot of artists like that out there. So on the blending mode on that one, it's important to know these things is called darker color. So I don't just put these in on normal mode or multiply or anything. I move around and play with opacities until it's just the way I want it to be. Question: if you have time, would you be able to send out follow-up email? The only way I can do an email... Okay, you know what I'll do? I'll put links in the chat, in the comments. I'm sorry, because if all goes well, okay, plan A, if Instagram lets me save this, I'm going to put it on my IGTV where you can refer to it any other time. If it lets me do that, once in a while it doesn't. If it won't do that, then I will, if you drop your email in, DM me your email, and I'll add you to my list, and then I'll send that out to my subscriber list, because they'll all be interested in that anyway. But my first plan will be to put it in the comments of the IGTV. Thank you, Steph. So my producer Steph, I always call her producer Steph. She just dropped my contact. Send me your email in the link, KarenHuttonArt.com/contact that Coco Chanel just put in the chat. So, okay, then, right. Okay, I wasn't done because now, I'm a little flowery. I'm a little bit, there's always got to be a little extra something, something. So I dropped a flower because it felt like, how flowers, if you were to walk everywhere you went and there were flowers and petals strewn where you were about to walk, wouldn't you feel special and kind of ethereal and kind of like, and what if it was fragrant? And everywhere you went was lovely and scented and fragrant. And so anyway, that's what this symbolizes, is that may your walk in life be filled with petals and fragrance and things that you love. So that was why that was there. And this is another one of Anna's pieces, a little flower, and it's in here on multiply and opacity 100%. So blending mode multiply, opacity 100%. But I'm a very detailed person, and it's all these fun little finishing details that I just so enjoy. So basically this next layer, you won't be able to see it. I can see it. It's just very faint. I doubled that layer. And then then the other thing I did was I went, okay, now that I got my birds, and see, this is the thing about working in Photoshop and working in layers and being able to do this. See these leaves right here? I went, okay, now that, because I wasn't sure what all I was going to put in here. So I'm just adding stuff and I'm going, now it needs this, now it needs that. So in that sense, it's really meditative. It's really creative. You're letting your muse play and create. And it's like painting, except that I don't paint. And that's a whole other live about why that is. But nothing nefarious, just chemicals. Anyway, so what I decided at this point was, okay, that's too much. Now I don't like those leaves anymore because now they're distracting. So I made a layer mask, doubled the layer. I'm sorry, you know what? I'll show it to you and I'll zoom in here. So basically at this point, what I did was this layer right here, I doubled it. And then, so now I'm here, and this is a layer mask where I was able to, whoops, where'd they go? Get rid of my leaves and say, bye-bye. You're no longer part of my creation. I've moved on. I loved you, but I'm done with you now. So then I went, okay, so the one thing about, and the other reason I like to show things at what I do with them in Photoshop is partly to show you the options graphically that you could play with. But no matter whether I do anything graphic in Photoshop or not, I always use my editing tools. Like couple of my favorites, top of the list, are exposure. Sorry about that. I thought I blocked all notifications, including calls, but apparently calls come through anyway. Okay, had to stop that. So basically I bring everything into Photoshop to then make it all pop the way I want it to, same way I do with any of my photographs. So that's what I started working on with this. So I wanted the bottom to be brighter because it comes out it looks really bright on the iPad, but then you bring it on a computer and it's just not quite enough. But I like to do that once I've got everything in place. I want to do it all at the same time. So I brightened up the bottom, and then I took the whole thing. Then I, of course, got to add light, because sun was such a feature, and I wanted the geese to be flying into the sun. So I added the color down here and then the nice brilliant sun. But then I went, okay, now it's just a little too bright and too much. And I lost my blue sky, which for some reason I was very attached to the blue up here, and adding the sun like I did. And I did that in exposure software because they have a feature where you can add lighting, all different kinds of lighting effects, and they're super easy to use and they're really cool. The other software I like is Nik, which is owned by DxO now, so I'll use Nik, and also Luminar. For different reasons. They each have their little specialties. So I mention them, when I mention one, like exposure, I'm not saying I don't use the others. I do. Just right here, I just happen to use exposure to do that. So then I went, okay, I want my blue back. So what I did was, at this point, those of you who know a little bit about Photoshop, I added an adjustment layer, and it's blue. It's like that color blue. Looks like this. And then I made it soft light blending mode so that it would shine through, but add a bit of color. So I'll show you with it and without it. So it's just a little bit washed out. And then I just brushed it out of most of the image except here, and I wanted a little bit of that reflection in the grass, right? So there you go. So there's just these little details that really make it work. And then for me, that kind of did it. I was like, at first I thought when I added I'll just show you one more thing. When I added the light, I thought maybe it was too much for the whole piece. And I had to sit there and look at it for quite a while to decide, no, I don't really want to lose this, because without it, honestly, I love the geese, but they sort of look like they're just sitting there. I wanted them to be flying off into the sun, into their light, because when we left, when we moved, it was traumatic. I was in grief for a year. I was depressed. I found it really, really difficult, even though it was the right thing. I'm glad we did it. It needed to happen. It didn't make it any less difficult emotionally. And the way that I had to think about it was, I'm moving on to my next thing, my next life, my next step. I'm moving into the light more. That was how I had to think of it, and that's still how I think of it, and that is in fact how it turned out. So this piece of art, which was all about my home in Truckee, had to have the light, because that's so much of what my work is about anyway, is about light. Not just photographic light, physical light, but the light inside, and the light of creation, and the light that we are all made from. So the fact that I added just a little bit more dimension in here balanced this out. I didn't want to lose the brightness, but I wanted it to be grounded, in the beautiful blue sky, and a little bit, some deeper tones to balance this side. So there was more of a contrast, and that was the piece. So that is the piece. My love letter to my home in Truckee is this piece. And the reminder for myself as I left was, wake up, Karen, rock the world, repeat. That's why I put that there. That was my own reminder. So there you go. It's a little combination of the piece, how I created it, and why, and the thoughts, and how you can do it too. Whoops. Here's how you can knock over your phone. The second one, let's see, what's our time? I'm just going to show you this next one quickly. If anybody has a question or whatever, just pop it in the comments. I love all of you for being here so much. You just have no idea. This is really fun. I didn't think I would enjoy sharing the work this much, but it's really fun. And some of you who have been in other lives have written me and asked the coolest questions and shown me your work and told me what you were working on. And it's really fun because it's like, this community of creatives that we are is really special, because we hold the vision, if you know what I'm saying. And it's a beautiful thing. One other thing I just wanted to show you, even though this feels sort of complete, but a piece I'm working on, I'm just going to go through this super quickly, is this horse image, which I love. But I had been working a lot and really wanted to be able to do some Procreate. And I was like, what does this do if I Procreate it? And that's what it did when I Procreated it. It had that feeling of this horse, and I call it Dreamer. this dreamy quality, which should be enough all by itself, straight out of Procreate. But of course, I'm me, so I have to do things like change the light. Okay, so where I'm really big on light. It's a little, I'll tell you right now, it's a little brighter on the phone, quite a bit brighter on the phone than it is on my screen. And my screen tends to be more in line with what I see in my prints. So I'm always creating art for prints. So I wanted to draw the eye a little more into the horse's face. So one of the ways to do that is to take some of the light out of the back, but I didn't want to lose the artistic feeling about it. And these layers I did all in Procreate as well. You know, it would really help if I made this bigger, wouldn't it? So it's subtle. And again, I don't know if this texture shows in broadcast, because broadcast quality like we have on live kind of flattens out some of these details. But not only is it light, but there's some texture because it's like a grunge brush or like a dust brush where I'm just trying to add some. And of course that this crosshatchy thing that it sometimes does, I don't know, I'm seeing that on my phone, is not what's in the image itself. But you can see, you know, really it's just from the there's the photograph, there's the painting. It's the coolest thing because you can make it look amazing. You got to choose the right brushes and the right techniques and everything, but that's learnable. And it's just a way of expanding. And my horse collection is super special. I'll be talking more about horses and things in the future, but there's a whole reason for that. And because it was dreamy, I wanted to add, I'm going to zoom you in again. I added some bokeh to the background. Again, that was a brush. And then this is also a brush. But the way I'm doing my brushes is either lower the opacity, again, this was in Procreate, so lower the opacity or change the blend mode into like overlay so that it just does this very subtle thing. So all these brushes were doing, you've seen it close, so I'm going to move it back, was simply defining more. Let me go back. Getting rid of the background a little bit, but adding some texture, adding some dreamy bokeh, changing the light focus, bringing it more onto the horse's face. And then, I don't know, this is where it's all getting very experimental. And this is like, I like this, but I'm like, what else could I do? So this is me in process. So I brought in a cloud. So this image that I'm overlaying is this, which is one of my, 10,000 cloud images that I have. So when I put it in, it's obviously blue, but I put it in the soft light blend mode. And then there's a really cool thing you can do, which is this layer right here is hue and saturation. So if you have your windows set up for adjustments, these you can all bring in. So what I brought in was hue and saturation, which is this icon right here. And then I'm going to give you a trick. Now I've highlighted on that. Of course, I'm on a Windows machine, so it's Alt right click until you see this little arrow. Let me zoom in on that for you. Pull this down. And you see this little arrow. Right now it has a cross through it because I've already created it. It's a clipping mask. So what it does is it affects this effect, this hue saturation is only affecting this layer right here. So what I did was I took it, let me pull it up. Look, can you see it right here? I took the, oops, I did the wrong thing, sorry. Why is it not showing? Yeah, yeah, that's why, because I did that. So this, I took the saturation of this cloud all the way down so that all it is now is light and shadow. So it's fun to see. I'm going to show you that now. I'm going to take it off. Let me put this back on. Yeah. So I'm just going to toggle back and forth. It's subtle, but it's just, and you can do this to your photographs too. You can take clouds, you can take all kinds of things and just throw light around. Create shadow and light. I did the same thing again. I took another, okay, so this is where it gets crazy. So okay, so anyway, to keep it more realistic or just to sort of be more subtle, yes, you can just do this. Then if you want to get really crazy, like this is where it's really experimental for me, is I brought this in. It's a cloud. It is on the blend mode exclusion, which does this weird thing. But then I changed the hue saturation to that. So it's not blue. It could be, but that might be a little too gimmicky for me. This might be a little too bright for me. I don't know. I just think it's kind of interesting. So here again, I'm stretching, I'm reaching and trying some new things, as I encourage you to, and see what kind of creations you can come up with that convey a story, convey a feeling. And why do we want to do that? Because as artists, that's our job. Our job is to shift thinking, create feelings. This is the job even in the Renaissance. This is why the artists were held in such high esteem, because very often their work contained the idea of something new to think about. Here's how to maybe see reality. Here's a different way to think about things. And of course, that can work for good and evil. But for us, it's about good, and it's about a vision. It's about dreaming of something more. For me, it's about bringing more light into the world through my work, where it can be like oxygen on the wall or sunlight to someone's soul. I know it's so poetic, but honest to God, that's what in my heart and my muse, that's what I'm thinking all the time. So finding new and different ways to do that is what keeps it spicy. It keeps your inner eyes and your creative eyes open. And so that's why that's the spirit with which I said yes to Photoshop World and showing Procreate, which again, the link is pinned in the chat if that interests you. But it's also why I wanted to come on here and show you a little bit about what I'm working on and what I've got coming up and just give you ideas, of what you could do. So I hope you're enjoying that. I hope you will, become part of my world, join in with these weekly sessions. This particular one, because I'm going on my road trip, I'm a little bit like, I want to tell you it's going to be exactly this. I'm going to aim for Fridays, I think, but I'm going to keep my newsletter, keep my mail list apprised of all the changes and everything. And that's where I can, share more of my impressions and things like that. And if any of you, that way you could also, through my newsletter, you can also reach me directly. Yes, I try to check my messages here as often as possible. But sometimes life moves quickly and I have a lot going on and sometimes I miss them. I'm trying not to. I actually have some help, so I won't be doing that as often. But I hope you'll join my world. I want to be a part of yours. I just wanted to share some of what I got going here. What else can I tell you? I'm going to switch back to me for just a second, just so I can say thank you. Thanks for being a part of this. I hope you'll join me for our future lives. We're going to do the ones for my photographers, and then we'll do some that are just about art and printing and, and other areas. And if you have ideas and things you want to learn about and hear about and explore, let me know. You can DM me, or if you're on my mail list, you can email me. And what else? Am I forgetting anything? I don't think so. If nobody has any more questions, I thank you so much for joining me. This was tons of fun. I can't wait to do more. And to all of you, have a fantastic weekend, wherever you are. Bye.